Tonight on A Conversation with Brian, we have author Bill Hall. Bill has written a wonderful new book. It is called Powerful Guiding Coalitions. Bill has served as a classroom teacher, an assistant principal, and he's also served as the past president of the Florida Association for Staff Development, now Florida's Learning Forward. But we're going to let you hear from Bill himself in just a few minutes as we dive into his book, his career, and all the other things that he'd like to talk about in education. And so without further ado, we'd like to welcome to A Conversation with Brian, author Bill Hall. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is such an honor. It's good to see you. Looking forward to it, man.
No, I am so impressed with you. I see you on Twitter, and you have been so relentless and consistent with publishing or in posting about your book. It's really, really impressive. But what I wanted to do at the start of our show, Bill, is really to get to know you, to have my audience get to know you. And so what I normally do is ask my guests to talk a little bit about their personal journey, their professional story, so my audience can get to know a little bit more about Bill Hall. So who is Bill Hall?
Sure. I'm married to Carol. I tell people we've been happily married for 35 years. And on August 14th of this year, we will have been married a total of 52 years. But we tend to agree that 35 have been relatively happy. She's a retired pre-K handicapped teacher assistant. And we have two daughters, Heather and Stacy, and they're both elementary teachers. And we have four grandchildren. The oldest is a rising freshman at the University of Florida.
Wow.
And the youngest in July, past July, is 7 years old. So we've got quite a range there. I come from a long line of educators. My great-grandfather was superintendent of schools in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. One grandfather taught Latin and Greek at Cleveland Heights High School for 40 years. I had a grandmother who taught in a one-room schoolhouse in West Virginia. My mother was an elementary teacher.
Wow.
Of course, my daughters. So we have 5 generations of educators in our family. I grew up in Winter Park, Florida, and I attended a small college in South Carolina, Erskine College, and graduated with a degree in English. It was a battle always between English and biology, and English won out by one course.
Had you planned to be a teacher, or is that was a different path for you?
I really didn't plan. I wasn't planning on anything. I originally started out to be in pre-veterinary science, but then they said you had to take chemistry and physics and calculus, and I couldn't spell any of them. So I said,
you're like, that's not for me, huh?
I said, Mr. Hall, it takes a little more than a love for animals to be a veterinarian. So I ended up finishing with a degree in English, but during my senior year, I decided I wanted to go into teaching and follow my mother and my grandparents' path in the profession. And so I took a few classes of elementary education in my senior year, but didn't finish with the degree or certification. So my first day with students at Sherwood Elementary in Eau Gallie, Florida, was my first day with students. I didn't have the benefit of a student internship.
Really? Wow.
Really?
You just breathe fire.
Right. Just jump right in. So for 3 years at night and on weekends and during the summers, I finished my elementary ed certification classes to become certified as an elementary teacher. Okay. I taught for 10 years and I loved teaching. I didn't want to do anything else. I had no ambitions to do anything else. And as Bob Ross, the television artist, says, my whole life was a series of happy accidents.
Yeah.
Just kind of tumbled through and ended up where I am. But I loved teaching and had no aspirations. Who on earth would ever want to be an assistant principal? It had to be out of their mind. Then the opportunity came. I got my master's in administration supervision, and then I applied for the assistant principalship, and I was an assistant principal at the elementary level for 3 years. And I love being an assistant principal, and that's exactly what I wanted to do and retire that. Well, I after about my second year of assistant principalship, I said, you know what, I think with the right conditions, I probably could become a principal and do that. And again, I loved it. That's what I wanted to be. I had no further aspirations, but the opportunity to become the director of professional development and educational leadership for Brevard Public Schools came, and I took the chance. And so the last half of my career was as the director of educational leadership for our district. So if you do the math, I spent 44 years providing service for Brevard Public Schools.
That's amazing. That's quite a career. And then you write a book, which I think is fantastic. We'll get to that in a moment. But as I listen to you talk about your journey, it's not unlike a lot of people where they say, I was content at this position, but then I moved to another position. I think it speaks to this when we talk about, and I think Mike Maddowes talks about this as well, endless opportunities and endless possibilities. And we talk about how we should not limit any child. I think it speaks to what we do as we move up in our career or move on to different places and have different experiences. And when we think that we're content, the world's everybody's oyster. If we can help people understand that being content is okay, but it's okay also to be uncomfortable and move to a different position to edify yourself.
Exactly. And we don't know who's in our sitting in front of us as teachers. We have no idea. If my teachers and professors knew how my life ended up, they go, "Oh, that can't,
Yeah.
not that guy."
So, and I think that's where your passion comes from. My passion comes from is like, we know that it's in every kid. Like, we're not saying every kid's going to go in they have to be gifted in everything, or they have to have a strength in everything, but they do have a passion, a strength. And sometimes we have to help them kind of figure it out. And then we have to nurture that and then point them in the right direction, then just let them go.
Got it.
Yeah. So let's get to your book. You and I are deeply steeped in the professional learning communities at Work Model. Both of our mentors are, Rick, the late Rick DeFore and Becky DeFore, Bob Aker, who are the original architects of this model. Can you talk a little bit, one, how you really first found out or were introduced to the PLC at Work model? And then, let's, dive into your book, because I think it's really important in terms of sustaining this culture to make sure that we have the right people in place and the right team in place to really make sure that the rest of the school continues to push this process deeper and deeper into the heart of our culture in our school.
Sure. Well, just like my journey to becoming a director of educational leadership for a large school district in Florida, my path through the PLC at Work process is very similar. It's like, who'd have thought? I left the principalship in 1992, and this is prior to the publication of Learning by Doing and PLC at Work process. And I was on the host committee or the conference committee for the 1994 National Staff Development Council annual conference.
Okay.
I just become the director of professional development, and I had the opportunity to join this committee. Right. And we met for about 18 months. And part of our planning for the annual event in Orlando was we had to shadow our counterparts in the annual conference the year before. So in 1993, I went to Dallas, Texas to shadow my counterpart so that I'd learn my duties and responsibilities for the annual conference in Orlando in 1994. Sure. Well, I could also attend breakout sessions. And there was one on leadership. The man's name was Dr. Rick Dufour. He was superintendent of schools in Lincolnshire. And so I was interested in that. And it was an all day. And I'll tell you how long ago it was. It was on an overhead projector, and Rick had the acetate frames. They kind of yellowed
Yeah.
with the board frame. Okay, so I'm dating myself.
Funny. No.
Some of your listeners will go, "What's an overhead projector?"
Yeah.
It was good. We connected as far as not personally, because I was in the back of the room,
Right.
but we connected on concepts that he said I agreed to, I had in place as a building principal. And this is before the PLC at work process.
Yeah.
And we broke for lunch, and I had a scheduled meeting, so I wasn't set to go back. Well, the happy little accident was the meeting was rescheduled. And so I went back and for the rest of the session. And his humor was my humor and that type of thing. But darn it, I had vision, I had mission, I had goals, but it was like a lightning bolt that hit me in the back of the room. I swear a big explosion when he talked about values.
Yeah.
I almost got up and went, that was what was missing in my principalship. I had pieces in the PLC process, even though it was processed, but that was it. So I contacted Rick to bring him in on leadership. And in 1994, he came in and worked with our staff for a summer program. And then what he liked about what I was interested in is I saw the PLC at work process as a mechanism for creating leadership capacity in our district. I wasn't focused on student learning. My focus was creating capacity and sustainability in the leaders in our district. So Rick liked that, my take on it, and I kind of came in a side door and not right as a practicing principal with the concepts.
But the thing is you, although you said you weren't focused on student learning, you were focused on leadership, but you were focused on student learning, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But I woke up every day worried about who's going to become our leaders, our assistant principals, our teacher leaders, our principals, our district staff for our district.
Yeah.
That was my job. And I could do that so much better with the PLC at work process.
Sure.
And I was invited to join their PLC Academy that we met for a year. Right. And then they invited me to apply to become an associate, and that's how I got into it.
Rest is history. So let's dive into your book. I'm going to turn it around because you'll see the sticky notes all over your book and
wonderful book
back of me. But yeah. I read it, and again, thanks
I've got one too.
Thanks for giving me a shout out. One of the things that I noticed at the beginning of the book, when you started to talk about, leadership and, not really knowing where to start, you tell this story called the cardboard box theory. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it was really intriguing, because it's very simple in terms of understanding, but it's very powerful.
I guess I've always been scared of leadership. I was not a leader. I never saw myself as a leader. Leaders were born, and they were, they led thousands of people and did all kinds of exciting things that were heroic. And I wasn't one of them. I never saw myself as one. And so even as I started teaching, I wasn't grade level chair. I really didn't lead anything. Never perceived myself to be a leader. About my 5th year as a teacher, the father of one of my students, he was the president of a civic organization in our community.
Right.
And their focus was twofold: community service, but also individual and leadership development. Right. And he invited me to attend a meeting, and I did, and I was interested in it, in serving the community. Sure. But then this leadership component, they had a public speaking course that you went through, and they had different professional growth types of activities and classes that you could take. That's where I started. In my mid-20s, I finally started to see myself gaining these skills like public speaking and leading projects that eventually led to my path to becoming an assistant principal.
Did you get an aha when you were started to go through that process? Kind of like, there are no superhero leaders. We start to acquire skills and we do certain things, but you started to realize that anybody has an opportunity to lead if they have the right skills.
And that's where the theory came from about the cardboard box, because I was the awards chairman of the 4th of July parade. It wasn't just the 4th of July parade, it was the bicentennial parade. You can't get any more important than that. I was the chairman of the awards committee. I've never had such a title in my entire life. So I was quite nervous about my ability to lead this and take responsibility. So I called the president of the organization up one night and I said, no, take me through this about being the leader of this important committee. And that's when he said, do you have a cardboard box? I said, well, yeah, sure. I've got one out of the garage. He said, take it down to the trophy shop, put the trophies for the first, second, and third place parade winners in the box, put it in your car and bring it to the parade site. And then we're going to pass them out. And I said, is that it? And he said, that's what
that's it, right?
awards chairman does. And it was so simple.
Yeah.
They weren't asking me to be an officer or to do anything public in front of hundreds of thousands of people. It was a simple act of just being part of the operation and
Sure.
serving capacity.
Well, one of the things you say is serving, and I think that's a big part of leadership. It's about us serving, and I hear Ken Williams say this all the time. When he was a principal, he said, "My job was to hunt, gather, and protect for my staff, and then get out of the way."
Yeah, people that get into it for power or position, they're in the wrong business. They're not going to be happy at all in the position. And that's why this collaborative leadership that we know so well and we talk about that are in our books and in our work is so important.
Yeah. In your book, you talk about the difference between a leadership team and a guiding coalition. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think when we start to think about how do we make sure that we get things done in our school and not let, if we have a guiding coalition, are we abandoning the traditional leadership team and some of the tasks that they have undertaken? And I think there are some questions and sometimes confusion on what is the difference.
We need both. And in one of my tweets, are they still tweets now that the
yes
logo?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but we can still call them tweets.
Whatever they are.
Yeah.
I have two graphics of a traditional hierarchical organization or traditional school leadership team.
Right.
And I have one that's linear and it's flat. And I had one tweet that said, if you want to know if yours is a leadership team, traditional leadership team, or a guiding coalition, look at your agenda. And if your agenda has all kinds of topics on it, and they've just a laundry list of things to do and to talk about, that's a traditional school leadership team. If the agenda is about student learning and PLC processes, that's a guiding coalition. And so the traditional school leadership team, we still have to have that. We have to have the managerial side. There's still budgets and schedules and all those kinds of things. But the focus of a guiding coalition is on the PLC processes.
Can a guiding coalition, can they serve the same purpose, like not the same purpose, but can one team do both kind of missions, the mission of a leadership team and the mission of a guiding coalition, or do they have to be separate, or it depends on the school?
It depends on the school, the size of the school, the maturity of the teams that work together.
Yeah.
Mike Mattis, I asked Mike about that, and he said what they did at Pioneer Middle is they had an agenda that had two pieces.
Okay.
There was the PLC only.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
And then the second part is nuts and bolts. Now, not every teacher that's represented on the guiding coalition has to be part of that leadership team piece.
Sure.
But those teacher representatives, those collaborative team representatives, their voice needs to be in the room when the meeting as a guiding coalition.
When you wrote the book, one, why did you feel it necessary? Did you feel that there was a void lacking, or did you feel like, when you presented or you talked to people, that it was even schools that were early adopters of the PLC at Work model? Do you feel like there was some slippage in the implementation of the process, or did you just write it because you felt like, yeah? Why did you write it?
I wrote it for three reasons. The first reason was I believe the height of professionalism is to be published.
Sure.
That's just a personal opinion.
Sure.
It was to honor my commitment to Rick and Becky. It was they encouraged me to write, and I felt that I needed to do that, to honor that. But the third reason was I was seeing bits and pieces, a paragraph here, sentence here, maybe a whole chapter.
Right.
But I didn't see a resource, even Cotter's work. It wasn't focused on education. So that was one need I was trying to fill. But I didn't see one resource from cover to cover that focused on nothing but the guiding coalition. Yeah. So I tried to gather all those resources together so that readers would have a single resource that they could go to, but then they could add it to their PLC at Work library so that it would complete that.
In your book, you turned the 4 critical questions of learning into those critical questions that the Guiding Coalition asked, and they really focused on the learning of the adults in the building, the teams. I really thought that was a clever way of really embedding the process within the Guiding Coalition.
That gets into my idea that I see the Guiding Coalition very similar to a test kitchen or to test pilots.
Okay.
And the Guiding Coalition tries it out. It's that whole learn together.
Yep.
So we're going to learn together first, and we're going to try it out. We're going to work with it and see what we can do. What do we need to enhance it, or what resources do we need? Make mistakes, and then have the Guiding Coalition members go to their collaborative teams and take that learning to their teams. So and that's how I saw the concept of, we're going to try it out first. We're going to learn about it first, and then we're going to operationalize it out to staff.
How's your book been received?
I could not believe the initial reviews. I thought my name was on a Post-it note and got on somebody's masterful. I'm serious. I could not believe, because I was a district staff member. I was not in the principalship.
Right.
So I didn't know how it's going to be taken, how it was going to be received by practitioners. So when those practitioners wrote back and said, I want this book now.
Yeah.
It was so empowering for me and encouraging for me to get the book finished. So the only method I have to follow is following it on Amazon. And
Sure.
It started out as the #1 new release in education administration.
It's amazing.
And yeah, it is amazing. And I mean, yesterday it was #10 in education administration.
Wow.
So I'm in good company, and I'm very, very pleased about it, but still much surprised that it was received so well.
In your book, you talk about the foundation, and you and I know this, but for those who are, new to the process, when we talk about, the three big ideas, a focus on learning, focus on, culture of collaboration and that focus on results. And then we talk about the four critical questions, and then we talk about the foundation of mission, vision, values or / collective commitments and goals that you talked a little bit about earlier. I saw in your book that you put beside that foundation PLC footings, these actions. And so that's a new twist because I hadn't heard that before.
And that's why the graphics in the book are building plans, and the cover is a hard hat and rolled up plans.
Yeah.
Trying to equate building a PLC like building a structure, a home or a building or a shopping center or a skyscraper. And I really like the tool Journey to Becoming a PLC, a Professional Learning Community by Bob Aker and Janelle Keating. I love that map that shows the journey as postcards. Well, their first set of actions were what I call them the footings. If the foundation of the building, if that foundation is vision, mission, goals, and collective commitments or values, if that's the foundation, then in a building, you have footings that support and distribute the weight. So as I looked at Bob and Janelle's work, I thought, you know what? If you look at their journey, they don't dive right into collaborative work. They don't dive right into vision, mission, and all that. They have some actions that take place before vision and so forth, or the foundation. So that's where I came up with the terminology of that. So if you look at their work, it's, have a common vocabulary, start a coalition.
Well, and I think one of the things that that does is that I always say this, or I've often said this, is that when we start this process, we need to make sure we have common language, common knowledge, and common expectations. And so that idea of learning together, that's where we start. It's learning together, building shared knowledge, engaging in collective inquiry, whatever you want to call it. But when confusion reigns, as Rick said, stop and learn together and make sure that we have some solid, as you say, footings to stand to start with. In chapter 4, you talk about something that I think is really important that we don't talk about as much. And it for me, it has to do with culture, but it's really when you talk about this idea of building powerful relationships, because we can't get anything done if our relationships are not built on mistrust. And you talk about this idea of trust and transparency. So can you talk about why you wrote the chapter on relationships, and how you use it with, or how you think staff or districts or teams should really make sure that they don't just skip over this? Because sometimes people say, well, this is not the process, but it is the process.
Well, Cotter talks about leading change, and he said the second stage was to have a guiding coalition. And then that's in 1996. In 1999, he said there are errors that organizations make when leading change. The second error is not building a powerful enough guiding coalition. So a guiding coalition can be this collection of individuals and allies to lead change.
Right.
A powerful guiding coalition has to have the right people. They have to work with high levels of trust, and they have to have a common goal for the guiding coalition. So that's where the title came from. It wasn't just guiding coalitions, but it was to become a powerful one. So I started to ask myself, how many of us as school leaders have ever formally discussed the topic of trust in our leadership team? I think we normally just say, trust me.
Yep.
We just assume. And so in that chapter, I tried to include, because trust is so important,
Yeah.
it's one of the three components to becoming a powerful guiding coalition, is to either reflect on it individually. In the book, it asks you to look at it on how you can improve your own trust within relationships with other people, or as a entire guiding coalition.
Sure.
So I tried to combine several tools, Shannon Moran's trust, and then Fraser's. There's some tools that I combined in a reproducible for individuals to look at either as a whole guiding coalition or individually to
I'm looking.
focus on trust.
Yeah. I think, when we talk about, like you said, we don't really focus on trust very much, and it's not something that we talk about. Like you said, we just say, just trust me. And a lot of times people are like either friends or friendly, and they say, oh, we have trust, but it really is not about that. We really have to engage in meaningful reflection to see if we really do have a trusting relationship and a trusting team.
And in that chapter, I just tried to kind of put that out there, and then give individuals and teams some tools and some things to think about if they want to work on that and improve it.
I also like in your book when you start to address that idea of fixed and growth mindset, because that's a really important piece of any individual in helping them move forward, because they have to reflect on, do I have a fixed mindset? Because if I have a fixed mindset, how can I help my colleagues? How can I help students? And so I think that's something that we don't do very often, is ask people, one, to learn together about that work around Carol Dweck's work of mindset, but two, to reflect on, what is our own mindset?
And then I in my research, I found a third mindset, and it's called in the grid. It's called an innovator's mindset. That was
Yeah.
and I thought that was something that was nice to have added.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like your book, and I really think that, um, educators in any part of their journey as a school that's operating as a professional learning community, or just starting that journey, it really will, one, if you're just starting, it will give you a solid foundation and very clear understanding of how you form a guiding coalition and what steps you need to do to make sure that it sustains. And then the schools that may be further along in the journey, I always say, whenever we have new staff in our building, we're a new staff. And so you can't just say, oh, we did this last year. We have to make sure that we're constantly revisiting and digging deeper to make sure that we have crystal clear understanding of our role as a guiding coalition and as a staff. And so I think your book does that. I think the other question I had when it came to your book is that we have some schools that will say, well, we only have one grade or one class at each grade level. And they say, we only have like 20 teachers in our whole school, or 15 teachers in our whole school. Can we just have all the staff be on the guiding coalition? Is that possible?
I believe it is. I think the work by Yost and Rick
Mhm.
Lean, on Yost, is really helpful to answer that question. And many times I defer to them.
Yeah.
Uh, it, I've communicated with Brig with some questions on singletons and small schools.
Sure.
And what if you don't have enough in a small school? And he said, well, then you look for the coalition of the willing.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and so there are ways to do it. You just don't look at it and say, well, we're too small to do it. But there are times where I think the whole school is the guiding coalition is, and you served
Sure.
up kind of.
Sure. Who are the people who influenced you along the way? I mean, we talked a little bit about your family who were um, educators, but who were some of the people, either teachers or mentors, as you became an educator? Who were some of those people that you really feel like, wow, those people really helped to shape who I am as an educator.
I put several of them in the book. I had some principals that encouraged me to get my master's, encouraged me to lead when I didn't see myself as wanting to or needing to. They saw something in me that I never saw
Yeah.
for whatever reason. So Bill Murray, who took a chance on a young teacher who didn't have elementary ed certification,
Right.
but just saw something that nobody else saw, I guess. And he took a chance on me. And I've got a 3-page handwritten letter back in this bookcase that he wrote when I became a principal.
Wow.
And I never knew the things that he shared in that letter of what he thought. It was amazing. And I had another principal who, John Stenson, who was my second principal. He encouraged me,
Mhm.
and he kept promoting me to take on leadership tasks. And then, of course, I had fellow principals, area superintendents,
Yeah.
and other directors that encouraged me. My mother was she was huge because as an elementary teacher, there was only one important thing in life, and that was to get a college education.
Yeah.
You know, that was so important, I guess, because of the background that I came from. It was just something expected.
Did you have, and you said your mother, did you have other teachers or memory of when you were in, grade school of, were you a good student, or were you a student that struggled, or it depended
I was very young. I was a student that struggled. I'm sure I would have had some letters attached to me, like ADHD and that type of thing. I was probably a good B, C student. Um, I, 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 I wasn't very successful as a student. If there were a few teachers that I thought about, Mr. Taylor in civics in ninth grade, Mrs. Bridges in ninth grade, teachers that saw some gifts that I had, that when
Yeah.
we group work or project work, that's where I flourished. But I was no good at memorizing dead presidents and dates that meant nothing to me. And so especially in math and social studies, if I wasn't showing an interest, I probably got a D in your class. But with the others, so I did have a few teachers that were encouraging. My English professor, Dr. Rickett, he was a huge influence on my academics in English.
Yeah. It's funny because I really think that, as I said before, we all have, our unique strengths and talents and passions. And if we are in a traditional school setting and our unique strengths, passions, and talents aren't tapped into, we could be seen as an apathetic student or not caring, when we really just haven't found something that we're interested in. Like you said, you weren't interested in dead presidents, right? And so if somebody goes through their entire school career and we, the adults, don't find their interest, then we label them instead of looking at ourselves and saying, what do we need to do to make sure that we try to give this student or these students access and opportunities to find their gift and their passion, their strength.
And of course, when I grew up, the age I am, very traditional. Answers were right or wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. Best students got the best teachers. We didn't know anything about learning styles, nothing at all.
Yeah.
We knew nothing about brain research. I'm a perfect example of the adult brain maturing in the early to mid 20s, because it wasn't until my mid 20s that all of a sudden I found that I was able to do these things that I thought were limiting me and keeping me back.
But the thing is, today is we have all this evidence, all this research. We know better, and so we know that some students come to us lacking certain skills, or they come to us from challenging situations, and not that we're lowering the standards, but we're going to plan accordingly. And so if a student is coming from a stressful home, we know that they probably have some issues with cortisol regulation in their brain, and it's hard for them to maybe build relationships, or hard for them to focus or remember. And it's not because they're not intelligent, it's because of the situations that they're coming from. And so how do we, the adults, plan accordingly and support that student accordingly?
Yeah, I was thinking if I'd had a principal like you, or if I'd had teachers like the teachers that we work with nowadays, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking. I'd be a veterinarian from Winter Park, Florida, probably in my retirement years. But you know, Brian, I wouldn't trade 1 second of it. I
Yeah,
wouldn't for anything. Who'd have ever thought that I would have ended up, being an author and having high leadership responsibilities in a large school district? Never would have crossed anybody's mind.
well, Bill, your path is, unique in itself, just like all of our paths. And your path was supposed to be this path, this journey. Because, I mean, think about, like you just said, but think about all the, thousands of people that you have influenced, and even more now by writing this book. And it just, it's like you throw a pebble into the water and you have these ripples, and that's what you've done with your career, but as well with the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on.
An honor. I really enjoyed my time with you.
Yeah, at the end of each one of my podcasts, I always say this because I think it's really important to say. My dad passed away about 3 years ago, and I, at his funeral, I shared this quote: "As I go, I am wearing you." And what it means, it's an African proverb. What it means is that, anybody that I have, come in contact with, anybody who's been a part of my journey, I take a piece of them and put on me. So what you see is not Brian Butler. You see all these people who have poured into me or who I have learned from. And so, you are one of those people, Bill. I am wearing you. I mean, the things that I've learned from you, your book, how you carry yourself, and just, we haven't seen each other. I don't think we've seen each other since probably, I think it was in Florida at one point, a ways back. But I just remember, just the way you carried yourself and how passionate you were for our profession. And so I just want to again say that you're a part of my journey, and I appreciate just what you've given to our profession.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with you.
Sure.
Best wishes, my friend.
Oh, I appreciate it. And so again, thanks so much for coming on A Conversation with Brian, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Bye-bye. Subscribe to A Conversation with Brian on my YouTube channel and Spotify.